welcome to Your Town and the Arts Edition. I'm your host, Paulette Lynch, and I have to say that the mission of the Arts Council for Monterey County, where I'm the executive director, is to improve the quality of life for everyone in Monterey County through the arts. And we're so pleased to be a part of this program overall. Special thanks to Mark Baer and Alex Vasquez for making this possible. Each month, we're exploring a different aspect of our world that's improved and transformed through the arts. And as usual for us, we have to do it with help from many partners and allies from all over the county. Each month, we take a little part of that whole scene and focus in on some theme, some idea, some area that we really want to explore. Today, it's all about our cultural heritage, and we're looking first through the lens of the Center for Photographic Art and the legacy of Ansel Adams, then the lens of the National Steinbeck Center, and then finally the legacy of two women who many years ago created an iconic and beloved music festival which continues to broaden our notion of what's our cultural heritage even further. So first we're turning to Brian Taylor, and thank you so much for being here. Among other things, Brian is our neighbor at the Sunset Center, the executive director of the Center for Photographic Art. So Brian, first tell me a little bit about you. What brought you to this center? How did we get lucky to have you here?
Dear Paulette, it's a pleasure to be here, an honor, and I'm always happy and willing to talk about photography's contribution to the culture of our region.
Thank you.
And as a matter of fact, we'll talk briefly about some momentous events in photography, in the history of photography that happened right here on the Monterey Peninsula, which influenced the entire world.
Mm-hmm.
You know, an enormous movement took place here, and I'm thrilled to talk about it. And I would love to talk about Ansel Adams and other famous people rather than myself, but
But first about you.
Sure, sure. How did I end up sitting here with you?
Yes, exactly.
Well, I am incredibly privileged to be the person currently carrying the torch at the Center for Photographic Art, and we'll talk a little bit about Ansel and the roots of the Center for Photographic Art, but tracing our heritage back to the Friends of Photography, which Ansel and others founded in 1967, we still, at the Center for Photographic Art, still maintain that same sacred, venerable space that is celebrating its 50th anniversary right now in 2017.
Well, we're going to get to all of that, but first,
yes.
about you. You can't sneak away.
Okay, this is a rare moment of
about
modesty
you,
here.
and how did they lure you here?
Sure. You know, the center has had directors before me, and they'll proudly have people after me. But they were looking for a director, and some of the board members had approached me because of my long time experience with the Center for Photographic Art. I was a card-carrying member of the Friends of Photography long before the CPA.
That's a good start.
Yeah, long before CPA was founded in
Okay.
1988.
Wow.
And 10 years ago, I was president of the Board of Trustees of the CPA, so I gained extensive knowledge of the organization. I've been honored to have solo exhibitions at the Center for Photographic Art. I've taught workshops. I've curated shows. So my particular resume, the planets kind of lined up in such a way that I seemed qualified to take the helm. And I'm super proud of it.
And you're having fun, I think.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Like you said, we're neighbors, and together we're doing all kinds of creative things at Sunset Center.
What's your favorite so far?
Well, I have to say, currently we have a Smash-a-Reno exhibition up in our gallery, and I invite everybody to come and see this while the getting's good. We have a Ted Orland show in our gallery who plays a big part in our discussion today, since he was Ansel Adams, one of Ansel's great friends. Ted spent hours printing in Ansel's darkroom. He was one of Ansel's assistants. And so we're honoring Ted with his own solo exhibition right now at the center. And it was wildly attended. And it's an amazing show. We call it Orlandia because Ted walks the earth and he discovers things that none of the rest of us see. And so there's a lot of humor and color in it. So
and this is what I love about the arts generally. The artists help us all to see differently.
Yes.
It's to see so much more in something small that we might have overlooked completely, and to see, of course, those big vistas in a way that we just don't normally have access to at all. So let's talk about Ansel Adams for a while. what I'm especially interested in is what made him the Ansel Adams that we think of. There must have been a life that he had before he was famous, and even a life before he was really making the kinds of images that we just dream about and try to find in some way.
That's a great question, Paulette. You know, he is a prime example of a world-class creative person, and it would benefit all the rest of us to figure out how that happened. And I brought some fun images for us to look at while we speak. Let's begin with Ansel's beautiful twinkling eyes.
Yes.
He lived to be 82, and for his entire life, he had that boyish twinkle in his eye. I think that partly answers your question. He was always creative, always positive, always smiling. He broke his nose in the earthquake, the 1906 earthquake. The world threw him up in the air. He came down on his nose, broke his nose, as you can see in this fun picture. And people would ask him, Ansel, when are you going to fix that crooked nose? And he would tell everyone, oh, when I grow up. And here he is, about 80 years old, waiting to grow up.
That's fantastic.
But he had many friends. This is the son of one of Ansel's great friends. This is Cole Weston, who played a big part in the Center for Photographic Art. He was one of the founders of what we call CPA. CPA began in 1988. After the Friends of Photography moved to San Francisco.
Oh, right.
And we really owe a lot to Cole Weston, who was a performer, and so the very new Sunset Center asked Cole, how would you like to have this room? And so he was one of the founders of the organization.
That's exquisite.
And we'll take another look at Ansel when he's 14-year-old, sitting in one of his favorite places in the world at Yosemite with his very naive camera. That in his teens, he fell in love with nature. He fell in love with Yosemite. He was destined to be a concert pianist. This also answers your question,
yes.
Paulette. He loved music. He was incredibly disciplined in music, and he'd be the first to say that everything he learned about music transferred to his love for visual art.
Okay.
And he even invented a technique in photography that's still widely practiced by thousands of people around the world, people who shoot film. Here's a great example of his zone system, in which Ansel Adams took existing information and simplified it for the rest of us so that we could get these incredibly rich results with beautiful contrast. Here's one of his classics from his favorite place in Yosemite. Yeah. Another momentous moment in his life as we work our way up to the present, he was one of the founders of this world-changing movement that I alluded to earlier. He and Edward Weston and Imogen Cunningham and a handful of other people founded a brand new movement in photography called F64 in 1932.
And where was that based?
They had a show at the Legion of Honor up in San Francisco, and their philosophy, which rippled around the world really and still influences many photographers today. They named their new movement F64 because they felt that the proper photograph should be absolutely razor sharp, you know, from the nearest object to the furthest object. Yeah. And one way to achieve that is to shoot with a tiny aperture, F64. So that's my long-winded explanation of one of the many great things Ansel did for photography. Perfect example we're looking at now of his beautiful Mount Williamson, showing you this rock in the foreground in razor-sharp focus, which is just a few feet away from his camera, all the way to infinity, Mount Williamson. I'll just give you a tiny little footnote on this picture, too.
We like that.
One of the many lovable things about Ansel Adams, the real title of this is called Mount Williamson from Manzanar. Many people don't finish that title, you know, it's just Mount Williamson. Right. But right behind Ansel Adams, and the reason for him being there, was the Japanese internment camp during World War II of Manzanar. And here's Ansel Adams, a Caucasian guy in the midst of World War II, when most of America really distrusted Japanese people. Ansel Adams went to Manzanar and produced a book called Born Free and Equal, and he was actually championing their freedom. Wow. And believe me, he was a very lone voice in America as a white person when we were fighting the Japanese in World War II.
So, and that's another way that artists are at the forefront of those kinds of conversations, that giving voice to people who don't have one right now, finding ways to talk to people and beyond words, really, and in a way that opens their hearts and opens their minds to what really needs to happen next. So,
Beautifully put, Paulette. You know, beautifully put. He, you know, I think it was Ezra Pound said, "Artists are the antennae of our race."
There you go.
And there was Ansel Adams doing the right thing, even though his book "Born Free and Equal" was not too popular in America.
At that time, yeah.
Yeah.
And also, well, that was something that came up recently at the Americans for the Arts Conference. Is there's a wonderful person named Brian Stevenson who is talking exactly about those kinds of things, and he said that one of the things that we have to be willing to do, as particularly who's really challenging all the artists in the room, is to be able to have those difficult conversations, to be able to be in those difficult spaces, and then to bring people in, and that's how we all move forward.
Fantastic.
So that's so admirable. I'm so happy that you shared that story as well. So one of the things that we're so interested in is the Friends of Photography and how that got going. One of the things that at the Arts Council we're so aware of is that the artists have so much talent, and they develop their expertise, and they do different things, but they yet need other people around them. They need allies. They need supporters. They need people who are going to provide access to resources, access to buyers and friends and other people. So is that what the Friends was all about, or did they have other purposes as well?
Great thoughts, Paulette. And that's one of the reasons we all appreciate the good things you do at the Arts Council. You are an ally. You help make things happen.
That's our mission. That's
Absolutely.
our passion.
And I think we couldn't come up with the name of an organization that better answers your good question than the Friends of Photography. In 1967, Cole Weston and his brother Brett Weston and Ansel Adams, Win Bullock, some very illustrious and excellent people, walked into this room that had been Carmel Grade School in 1967. They were invited in, and they formed, I just imagine Ansel Adams and Cole and Brett and others standing in the room thinking, yeah, this will do. You know, this will do as a great gallery. What should we call it?
Yes.
And they named it the most friendly thing you could name it, the Friends of Photography.
Yeah.
And so they had 15,000 members worldwide. Here we're looking at Beaumont Newhall, a wonderful photograph by one of the great I hate to say products of Ansel Adams and this legacy, but Martha Cassonade was a dear friend of Ansel, and she made this great picture of Ansel and his dear friend Beaumont Newhall. Beaumont founded the first photography program at the New York's Museum of Modern Art.
Oh, wow.
And Ansel and Beaumont were dear friends. Beaumont was my professor when I got my Master of Fine Arts.
One more connection
that's
for
right.
you. Yeah, that's amazing.
And Imogen Cunningham was one of the original founding members of F64. I know I'm bouncing around between different organizations here, but women certainly participated in these early days. It was, I will admit, more of a boys' club. You know, Ansel, Brett, Cole.
Yes.
But there were great women like Imogen Cunningham, and even second and third generations people like Judy Dater, Martha Cassonade, Cara Weston, the granddaughter of Edward Weston. Here's a great image that kind of compresses time. I took this picture during Carmel's recent centennial parade, you know, the celebration of 100 years for Carmel, and it was a treat to see this wonderful tribute to one of the great citizens of our region, Ansel Adams, this poster, this banner in the parade, and I was able to photograph his banner in front of what is now the Center for Photographic Art. Here's a great interior view of the Friends of Photography's space, which now the CPA, Center for Photographic Art, still very proudly maintains. We hardly missed a beat from 1967 to this year, 2017, 50 years.
That's so amazing.
And look at this. I like to call these young talented artists the Rat Pack. These are certainly the prodigies of Ansel Adams and others who brought this style of West Coast photography to our region. People in that group, Ted Orland was in that photograph, and the amazing world-famous Sally Mann was that little pixie with short hair in the front row.
So that was one of my questions for you today too, is how are you continuing that tradition of getting youth involved? You have some great programs that are underway or that are haven't been even going for that long, but you are doing some things. Can you tell us what you're doing, and then also how did you get started? Why is it important to engage the youth? We're talking so much about legacy and bringing things forward from previous generations. What are you all doing?
That's a great question. We are always open. As a matter of fact, the Center for Photographic Art is always free and open to the public. And
That's a great start. Huh?
Yeah. Free. We do have memberships, but we are thrilled to have anybody come visit our gallery during our hours.
What are your hours?
Wednesdays through Sundays, 12 to 4. And I'm often there on other days, and I always open the door when I'm there.
So Wednesdays through Sundays. So
we're just closed Mondays and Tuesdays. And we have visits very often from the local high schools. We are friends with all the photography teachers in the region, from the community colleges all the way to high schools, and even some of the grade schools. We arrange field trips for students. We teach workshops. We are offering a very innovative workshop. We call them a pie workshop, P-I-E.
Once in a while I come in and steal a piece of that pie.
We're always welcome. It's
because you actually have a pie there too.
Yes, we go to Gizditch. We get
hilarious.
20. We get 20 pies. But it's photography, ideas, and experience. And we offer scholarships. We make certain that we contact all the local photography teachers, again, from community colleges, even to Carmel High and Robert Louis Stevenson and all the rest. And
this is amazing.
Sure.
So let me just ask you, because we're starting to run out of time. You're marking your 50th anniversary, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
And you have some sort of celebration planned, maybe? What's up?
We will. Later this year in the fall, I believe we will have a very fun celebration of 50 years of the gallery space.
Wow.
Tracing our roots back to the Friends of Photography. If you're allowed, if you'll allow me to fudge and say CPA's been there for 50 years.
That works for me.
Then
I'm easy.
I will finish by bragging that we are then the second oldest photography organization in America after Alfred Stieglitz's Camera Club of New York, 1889.
Well, we're just so proud to have you in our midst and see your impact going everywhere and sharing so much of what these artists have done and what they were thinking about. Can you, if for people who want to just have to know more, can you just shout out your website?
Yes, we got a great website address when the getting was good years ago. We are the very easy to remember photography.org.
Well, we'll leave it at that. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here.
Paulette. Thank you.
Thank you.